Having a baby is easy, right? I mean, everybody does it. 81% of women will have a baby at some point in their lives. That's a lot of people having babies. By contrast, I have run marathons. Only 0.5% of the population has done that. Hence, the way I saw it, having a baby is easy. Now, as you can imagine, when I got pregnant, I found out very quickly that pregnancy is not fun, and it most certainly is not easy. I'm pretty sure all 81% of the women who've had babies will agree with me on that one. However, unlike most of those women, I had a uniquely challenging pregnancy, with the stats to prove it. My pregnancy started out normal enough. I found out first and then told my husband, Bart. I was ecstatic at the news, but I had time to think about it before Bart got home from work. You see, 80% of miscarriages happen in the first 12 weeks, and I was only a few weeks into my pregnancy, which made me nervous. So when I told Bart the good news, I immediately followed it up with my concerns about miscarriages, leaving him both happy and worried. In retrospect, that probably wasn't the best way to tell my husband we were having our first child. We decided to wait until we got to that 12-week benchmark before we went public, which was hard for me because I got very pregnant very fast. I gained weight, I was dizzy and nauseous and faint. I wanted to be able to share with my friends that there was actually a really good reason for me to be so miserable all the time. Instead, I suffered in silence. But the 12 weeks passed, and after it, we went to my OBGYN office for an ultrasound to make sure that everything looked good, and it did. It was amazing seeing the little bean growing inside me. In fact, on the monitor, it kind of looked like it had a penis, which was cool. Not in like a pervy way. I mean, it was just cool to think that we were having a little boy. I was so relieved and excited to be able to share the news with friends and family. I mean, once that doctor gave us the thumbs up, it was like we had passed go. We were having a baby and nothing could take that away from us. At 20 weeks, they give you what's called the level 2 ultrasound. This is the big one, where they take all the measurements to make sure that the fetus is the right size and shape, and to give you fun information like gender. Now, because this is the last big test for, pregnancy before you know everything else is going to be good after that, a lot of people get nervous about it. But I wasn't worried. I already knew I had a healthy little boy growing inside me. He was so active, kicking me and punching me all day and night. There couldn't possibly be a problem. Bart left work early, picked me up, and we headed to our 3 o'clock appointment at Fairfax Radiology. Remember how active the baby was? It made the ultrasound last over an hour. The technician was chasing that thing around my belly. She actually got frustrated. "Your baby moves too much." I smiled at Bart. He had heard me complain about that about 1,000,000 times already. After a little while, she said, "Do you know the sex?" "We think it's a boy." "Do you want me to tell you?" "Yeah." "You're having a girl." There was magic in that moment. Not that it would have mattered more one way or the other, but knowing for sure that we were having a girl made it so real. She was a girl now, not just an embryo. And no, she didn't have a penis. We were probably looking at the umbilical cord that first time. After a little while, the technician left to go get the radiologist. Bart and I held hands, tears in our eyes. We admitted to each other that secretly we had both kind of wanted a girl. The radiologist came in and started taking more images. She was very serious. It was more than just frustration at the nonstop movement. She seemed concerned. "Is anything wrong? Let me finish what I'm doing and then we can talk." Not the no that I was fishing for. By the time she was done, it was after 5 and the place was a ghost town. I changed back into my street clothes, came into the room, and sat down with the radiologist. There is more calcification in your baby's heart than we like to see. Okay, what does that mean? You'll have to talk to your doctor about it. I called, but the office is closed. I'm going to call them first thing in the morning, and I suggest you do the same. And after dropping this news in our lap and then refusing to give us any information about it, she said just about the dumbest thing I've ever had a person say to me. Go home and relax. And as if that weren't bad enough, she said, and whatever you do, don't Google it. Had she never heard of reverse psychology? As soon as I got in the car, I Googled it. In her defense, I do wish I had listened. What I found were baby autopsy reports. Stillborn babies with calcification in their hearts. What should have been a wonderful day, finding out we were having a little girl, telling everyone about it, turned into a horrible night of me imagining my baby dying and refusing to answer my phone. Bart said we didn't know anything and shouldn't jump to conclusions, but all I kept thinking about were baby autopsies. The next morning, I waited impatiently for it to be 9:05 a.m., and then I called my doctor. I left a message. An hour later, when they still hadn't called me back, I forced myself not to freak out, and I waited another hour. And then I called, leaving a message that started out okay. I am trying to be patient here, but I got some very bad news last night, and I need you to call me back right away. Thank you. At 12:30, what seemed like a million years later, the doctor called and apologized, saying they were short-staffed. She said, the calcification in your fetus's heart is called echogenic foci. Most little babies have a little calcification, but your fetus has more than we like to see. I need you to go get a fetal echocardiogram at a pediatric cardiologist and an ultrasound at Fairfax Hospital's antenatal unit. We're trying to determine if this is a heart defect or a genetic disorder. Which is how, a few nail-biting days later, Bart and I found ourselves sitting in front of a pediatric cardiologist. Dr. C was an intense, middle-aged woman who had the manner of someone pretending to be cheerful, which made me even more nervous than I already was. She drew a sketch of the heart and spoke quietly as she explained the results of the fetal EKG. The foci are located along the pulmonary wall, leading us to believe that these are just thicker areas of the heart muscle. Does that mean that our baby's okay? It's too soon to be 100% sure, but if I were a betting woman, I would bet on this being nothing to worry about. Whew, I can't tell you how relieved I was. I was trying not to be a bundle of nerves, but failing. Now we could finally tell everyone the good news that we were having a girl. In the meantime, Dr. C scheduled us for a follow-up just to be safe in a month, and in the meantime we decided that we were going to keep our appointment at Fairfax Hospital's antenatal unit. I wasn't worried about the ultrasound anymore. I mean, the heart specialist was betting on my baby girl being fine, so I was looking at this as just another opportunity to see the little beans squirming around. When we got to the hospital, the ultrasound technician asked why we were there, so I explained about the foci and how the cardiologist had said it was nothing to worry about. After about 10 minutes, the technician called a nurse into the room. Even though they were conversing to each other off in the corner, I could hear them perfectly. The technician showed the nurse the monitor and said, "They told them there was nothing to worry about." The nurse said, "I'll get the cardiologist right away." Is anything wrong? The doctor will explain when she gets here. I was getting sick of that answer. Apparently, the on-call cardiologist was from my heart specialist's office, but was a different doctor. The nurse and the technician had nothing good to say about the fact that Dr. C had missed something, but I didn't care about their gossip. I just wanted to know what was going on. Finally, the on-call cardiologist arrived with a portable EKG machine, and I laid back down and they did more tests, and after a little while she sat me up to explain the new news. Completely unrelated to the foci, my baby girl had a hole in her heart called a VSD. It is a small opening between the two chambers of the heart. Sometimes they close on their own, sometimes they never close but turn out not to be a problem. Sometimes they require heart surgery. It was too soon to know. This was just another issue we were going to have to monitor. Now the nurse and the doctor and the technician were all having a little power play, and they wanted to fight it out over more imaging of my belly. But we'd been at the hospital for 4.5 hours, and when I went to lay back down, I fainted. If you ever want to get out of a test, I highly recommend being pregnant and fainting. They brought me graham crackers and apple juice and let me go home. Now, this doctor had made it seem like the VSD wasn't a big concern. I was determined not to be worried. When you have a baby in your belly, everything transfers, even stress. I just decided to focus happy thoughts on the little girl growing inside me. It was in this period of time that a name came to me. It was so perfect, I knew it had to be hers. When I told Bart, he got tears in his eyes. At 22 weeks, our little girl had her name, Emma Grace. At 24 weeks, we went back for the follow-up with Dr. C. After another EKG, we had another consultation. This time, there was no fake smile. I could tell she was preparing to deliver bad news. The tumors in her heart. Wait, they're tumors now? Dr. C rushed to explain. There are two kinds of tumor they could be, neither is cancer. A fibroma will continue to grow as the fetus grows. Fibromas need to be removed before they can interfere with heart function. Like surgery? Like after she's born, right? We're not even gonna go down that path unless we have to. A rhabdomyoma will stop growing and eventually shrink. However, rhabdomyomas are an indication of a genetic disorder called tuberous sclerosis, or TS. It is too soon to know which type of tumor she has. The way I saw it, we had two bad possibilities. The one kind of tumor could grow until it stopped her heart. The other kind could be an indicator of a genetic disorder with symptoms like autism, seizures, and continuous tuberous growths in the heart, kidneys, and brain. The amazing thing is, both types of tumor are extremely rare. Only 1 in 10,000 babies gets either. That is 0.01%. If I were Dr. C, I would have bet against those odds too. I felt helpless. The only thing we could do was wait and monitor and go to more appointments. The next day, we had to meet with a genetics specialist. I tell you, we were getting around to a veritable plethora of medical practitioners. The geneticist was a sweet young woman who was very, very pregnant. She asked us a whole slew of family health history questions, none of which helped explain the tumors or the hole in Emma's heart. It kind of felt like a waste of time. If it were TS, she couldn't even answer any questions for us about it because they can't test for that until after the baby's born. But before we left, there was one more bomb to be dropped. If you choose, you could still terminate the pregnancy. Are you saying we should? Are you advising us to? I'm not saying that, just letting you know it's an option. Not in Virginia, but in other states. Are you saying it's our best option? No, it's just that it's only an option for a short time. In that moment, I realized that the odds were against us, that our baby girl might not make it. And the idea of her dying inside me horrified me. I have to explain that I loved her. She was my little girl, my little Emma Grace. She kicked me and punched me and moved around inside me. She was with me at all times, and I had no choice but to think about her constantly. I loved her, but it terrified me. The idea of what it would do to me, falling even more in love with her over the next several months, only to have her die inside me, or worse, in my arms. The way I saw it, we had a 50% chance of her dying, of the tumors being the fibromas that would grow until they stopped her heart. If she survived, her odds got crazy. 0.01% of the population get tumors in their hearts. Of those, 50% have rhabdomyomas. Of those, 80% get tuberous sclerosis. Of those, many live a very normal life, and a small percent die from a tumor growing in their heart or brain. In the moments after the geneticist said the words, "terminate the pregnancy," all the worst possible images played out in my mind. I could not bear the idea of carrying this life one day more if I was going to have to watch her die. Nor could I bear the idea of making the choice to end her life. It turns out that I am a betting woman because we decided to bet on her to survive. At 30 weeks, we went back for another appointment with Dr. C. She said, somewhat cheerfully, "The tumors haven't seemed to grow." I thought that sounded hopeful, like maybe the odds were tipping in our favor, but I needed clarification. And I needed Dr. C to understand what Bart and I were going through. We haven't been preparing to have a baby because we haven't known if we are having this baby. Does this mean that we should start preparing? She thought over her response for an eternity. It would be better if you wait until after our next appointment. So, no. The answer was no. We shouldn't prepare to have a baby. We had been waiting to know definitively what was going on with our little girl before trying to explain it to friends and family. Emma Grace was due in 10 weeks, and we still hadn't been able to talk about it. I hated being in this perpetual state of not knowing, of not being able to plan. Not that it wasn't hard on Bart, because it was, but for me, there was no escape. Every time she kicked me, which was all the time, I worried, incorrectly, but still, I worried that her hyperactivity was a sign of TS instead of a sign of health. And as we both grew bigger, I tried, but failed to not live in a misery of fear. When you are very obviously pregnant, everyone is happy for you. Complete strangers would smile at me and say, "When are you due?" or "How far along are you?" or the one that hurt the most, "Boy or girl?" I just smile back and say, "I'm having a girl," and try to believe it. Somehow, that month passed. I had bad days where I cried and thought horrible thoughts. I had good days where I managed not to think at all. And then it was June, and another appointment with the cardiologist. The results of the EKG 6 weeks before my baby was due showed that the tumors had not grown and they might have shrunk. Does that mean that they are the rhabdomyomas? We still can't be 100% sure, but it does seem more likely. And with grand fanfare and obvious relief, Dr. C announced, "You are having a baby." You might think we threw a party right then, but the last truly wonderful moment we had had during my whole pregnancy was when we were told that we were having a girl. Right before the news that came right after and just kept coming. When Dr. C said Emma would live to be born, all I could think was, okay, what's next? We had one final fetal EKG a week before Emma was due. When we got to the appointment, Dr. C was gone. They didn't tell us where or why, only that she was no longer with the practice. It might just be my imagination, but the new cardiologist was much more reassuring. He said, "The fact that the tumors have shrunk leads us to conclude that they are the rhabdomyomas. In my estimation, they will continue to shrink until they're not a problem. The VSD," remember the hole in her heart? "The VSD has all but disappeared. As far as cardiology is concerned, it looks good. And the tuberous sclerosis? You'll have to see a specialist for that after she's born. I can tell you that most of the babies we see with these kinds of tumors test negative for TS." I don't know if it was the news he gave us or his manner or the fact that the baby was due in a week, but as I left, I finally felt like I could go home and relax. I finally felt like I was having a baby. And on the morning of July 26th, I was handed a beautiful, screaming, punching, and kicking Emma Grace. If I had been in love with her before she was born, I was so much more in love with her after I met her face to face. As I held her in my arms, I knew, no matter what any tests said, that she was perfect. A week after she was born, we went back to the cardiologist. The tumors had shrunk to the point where they don't even need to be monitored anymore. The VSD has closed. The cardiologist pronounced Emma's heart normal. Emma is 7 months old now. There is still a chance that she has TS, though there have been no signs of it. There are more tests and more waiting until we can know for sure. But I haven't even bothered to crunch the numbers on her chances. The way I see it, the only thing I can be 100% sure of is that I love her and am blessed to have her. Thank you.